All right, guys, so this is one of my favorite topics to talk about because I love talking about footwork. I'm a footwork guy. That is my bread and butter. That's what I love to teach. It just is what it is. I'm big on footwork. And so one of the most important aspects in our training that we don't talk about is what to do next. So I threw my jab. What do I do next? Or I threw my rear straight. I threw the punch. Now what do I do? Most oftentimes, and most of you guys, if you're training on in person or online, if you're training at home, very commonly you are hitting the bag and you're staying where you are. You stay right here with your feet. You might punch in one place and you're just here. So I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to be stagnant because that's unrealistic. Because first of all, you're gonna have to typically move to reach your opponent. Your opponent's not just gonna stay in front of you. And when you hit, your opponent's not gonna stay there. They're gonna move most often. And oftentimes they're gonna try to hit you back. So it's very important that you understand how to use your footwork in the process of punching and then after you punch. So I want you to think about it this way. And I tell my students this all the time. I tell them all the time, for any technique that you do. So if I take the jab, you need to be able to do every single technique going in 4 directions. Bruce Lee in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, he talked about 4 directions in terms of footwork. Forward, back, circling left, and circling right. You can read about it in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. So you need to be able to learn how to attack in all 4 directions. So whether I'm going forward with the jab, if I'm going right with the jab, if I'm going left with the jab, if I'm going back with the jab, I need to be able to do all 4 directions at any time and any moment, whenever I need to. And you have to train it that way. Don't just train your punching stationary on the bag. Don't just train it right here on the bag and think that's going to be sufficient. You need to be able to learn how to move and angle in the process of the fight, in the heat of the moment. So I'm going to work this one a little bit here on the bob, move the meditation bench so I won't hurt myself. So be safe as you guys are training. Move any hazards out of your way as you're training. But I just want to give you guys a feel of how this is going to work. So when I throw my jab, which way do I want to go? First of all, let's say I'm working with Bob here. I threw my jab. I'm southpaw. I got my right side forward. I threw my jab here. My hands are up. What do I want to do? What makes sense? Which direction does it make sense to go? Again, we talked about 4 directions. I can continue to go forward, and in this case, I may be getting into trapping or grappling, or I can go to my left. If I go to my left, I may run into his rear side here, which he's got some strong tools over here. He's got his rear hand and his rear kick that I might run into. I can go to my right, which I typically do because now I go to his outside line. That's typically what I prefer to. He has less tools in which to strike because I'm moving away from his rear side. Of course, I can always go back. I prefer not to go back because typically he's gonna take that space. If I move back, if he's a good fighter, he's gonna come forward. And I don't want him to come forward because eventually there's only so far back I can go. So let's say I wanna go to my right. I wanna go to his outside line. So I threw my jab. What are the ways? How can I go to my right? So this is fundamental. So take notes on this. We go into more detail in our online course at www.jkdprocess.com. More detail. But if I'm here, how do I move to my right? What do you think? What should I do? If you were me, what would you do? I want you guys to think critically about this. Now, typically in boxing, if you guys done any boxing training, typically they're gonna tell you to step, right? They're gonna tell you to step right and then pivot. So they're gonna tell me to step and then circle. Does that make sense? That's very common. So I'm gonna throw my attack. Even if I don't step on my jab, let's say he's already in range, maybe he's coming forward. I intercept him with the jab. I retract my hand back to keep my hands up. I'm gonna step and then pivot. Okay, so that's one option. You can certainly step pivot. That's the traditional option. I don't have a lot of room here. There's a wall here, but if I'm attacking here, my hand comes back, I'm gonna step and pivot. Now, if I already know that I wanna step and pivot, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna step as I punch. So as I punch, I'm gonna go ahead and execute that step. You gotta be mindful when you do this because what happens? Every movement you do creates a vulnerability somewhere. So when I punch, obviously when I punch, that opens up my ribs here. It exposes my body for kicks or whatever body shots that he may be throwing. But additionally, when I take this step out, this also exposes the groin. So you gotta be mindful of that. Be mindful of everything you're doing, but hopefully you're not there long. But I like to move as I step or as I attack. So I'm gonna attack and step at the same time, boom, and then pivot out. Especially if I'm not throwing the jab with a lot of force. In this case, I'm not throwing it with a lot of force. I'm really just using it to set up. And if I know I'm gonna set up, if I know I'm going to the side, I'm gonna go ahead and step and then angle out and pivot around to that corner. Check this hand as I need to and throw whatever follow-up shots or kicks that I wanna throw. So that's one. You have step pivot. So I want you guys to think about it now, get creative. So what did I do on my step pivot? When I threw my jab, I stepped with my what? My front foot, my right foot. So obviously you have 2 feet. You don't always have to step with your right foot first. So I did my right foot first, and then I moved my left foot. That's how I step. How do I do the similar kind of thing by moving my left foot now instead? This is how you need to think if you're gonna be a JKD guy. If you're gonna call yourself doing Jeet Kune Do, you have to think outside the box. You have to be creative. It's not about just doing what everyone else does or just doing what you were taught or doing what's in the curriculum. Jeet Kune Do is the artless art, right? It's the formless form. That's the concept, that's the principle, it's the idea. So the idea is not so much that you mimic or you replicate what you've already learned, but you understand the principles and concepts of Jeet Kune Do. And once you understand the principles and concepts, then you can solve any problem. I always tell my students it's like doing math. If you come to me and I tell you, 2 + 2 = 4 and 3 + 5 = 8 and 7 + 7 = 14, and every day I tell you a different formula and you come to me and you pay me for that, but you never learn how to do addition on your own. You never learn how to add. And so what happens is when you face a problem that I haven't shown you, you don't know how to solve that problem. When someone comes to you and say, what's 120 + 2, you have no idea what that is because I didn't tell you what it was, and you don't know how to do math. So the idea is that if you understand the principle of math, you understand how to solve problems, you understand basic addition, it's the same thing in fighting. You understand the principles of Jeet Kune Do, you can solve any problem your opponent puts in front of you. Keep that in mind. So if I want to move with my left foot after my jab, what am I going to do? I'm going to take my left foot and move. Now we have a footwork in Jeet Kune Do called slide step. So I'm going to slide step, boom, and look at where I'm at. Boom, see, I just came back, okay? Pay attention, right? So I'm gonna move my back foot first, boom, and I'm right here, boom, and I'm right back. So what does that look like in application? Again, I'm a huge fan of footwork. So once I throw the jab, and I'm just keeping this hand down so you can see, obviously keep your hands up when you throw your punch, chin tuck, shoulders up. See my chin's next to my shoulder. Proper mechanics in punching. But I'm gonna take my left foot, and again, I don't wanna run into the wall here, but my left foot's gonna slide, and then my right foot's gonna slide. And then it brings me on the side of my opponent here. So it looks something like this. I'm here, I just threw my punch, and I'm gonna slide to come to this angle. Again, if I have more room, I'm gonna move out this way. Again, I always still like to check this hand. This typically is gonna put me in about tend to be in a left lead here, and so I'm gonna rotate for my follow-up shots or follow-up kicks here. Always think about which foot do you wanna move. I tell my students you have 3 orders of footwork. I can move my left foot, I can move my right foot, or I can move both, okay, at the same time. And so that is possible. This is basic body mechanics. It's nothing new. It's not rocket science. It's Jeet Kune Do. So again, I can move my right foot first and pivot out. I can move my left foot. I can move my left foot and slide out. That puts me, notice now I'm in a left lead as I do that, okay? So those are some basic mechanics on what to do, how to follow up after the jab. And all we did was just go in one direction, okay? We just went one direction. We did step pivot and we did a slide step, okay? Those are good tools. Now I want you guys to think about on your own, train that, practice that, but I want you to think about what's your follow-up. Keep in mind your basic principles. Keep in mind hand replacement. Keep in mind your shoulder is tucked, your chin is raised. Keep in mind where your stance needs to be, your body weight. Keep all those principles in mind. Think about your rotation in your punching as well. Follow the fundamentals, follow the basics. Don't lose those in the process as you add more advanced techniques. Now, what I want you guys to do at this point, if you're not signed up yet for jkdprocess.com, go to www.jkdprocess.com, and we're going more in depth in the curriculum and breaking it down step by step to build you guys up in the study of Jeet Kune Do. But outside of that, check out the next video because now we're going to talk about some of the fundamentals in kicks and some basic kicking mechanics I want you to keep in mind, especially if you're training on your own at home. What I'm trying to do right now is give you guys just some basics and common mistakes, just some things to nibble on that will help you in your study at home. Because I find that students, it's hard to learn Jeet Kune Do online. It's hard to learn at home. Even if you are training at home, you still need to go somewhere to spar to make sure somebody puts hands on you. literally, and you make sure what you're doing works. So check out our next video. We're gonna get into some common mistakes and basic kicking fundamentals, principles that you need to know that nobody else is really doing.